Hey guys, Jim Clark back with the Dismas Diaries. Glad to have you back with me. Today I've got a great adventure for you. A fellow named Bob, who is a professional musician and somebody who I've known for a long time now, over 25 years. And I was interested in talking with him about the several conversions that he's experienced and the conversions that he continues to go through. We had a great conversation, and I can't wait for you to see it. The funny thing is that as I'm thinking about doing this podcast, is all the things that I run into that I did not expect. Things happen obviously for a reason, but the way they occur to you is sometimes a little bit strange. It takes a while to figure it out. Like Bob is here today because somebody else was supposed to be here and they weren't able to make it. So suddenly I called Bob and he was available, which was a wonderful thing. Of course, in the middle of our conversation, one of my cameras bombed out on me. I was using a different camera. So if you see me in a different position, a different camera angle, and different lighting, that's what happened. Thankfully, I've got several cameras pointing at me, and I can switch them around from time to time. But it's one of the things that happens. People, aren't able to do what you want them to do, and things come to pass that you wouldn't have thought would have worked out, and they work out great. So without further ado, I'd like to talk to Bob, listen to what he has to say, and we'll have him again on because he's got an awful lot to share with us. Hi, everybody. I'm back with my buddy, Bob Kirby, an old friend. I've known Bob for, geez, a long time now. It's got to be over close to
25
30
years.
30 years anyway. Since before we met in Rockland.
Right, that's true.
So Bob's a musician, and I do not have a musical bone in my body, except I used to sing, but I don't have any talent in terms of music, and Bob has all the talent in the world, is scary talent. So I know Bob talk to you a little bit about who he is and where he came from and some of the changes that have happened. One of the big changes that happened as a result of conversion experience he had. So why don't you take it from here, Bob?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of people think that they're going to get struck by lightning or have some like big single moment in their life that's the hinge point, the turning point, and that might be true for some. Certainly, a lot of evangelicals, tout the born again experience. But I found in my own experience, and for many others, it's kind of like a bunch of different experiences along the way that God shows up and makes a big difference. And I think one of the most profound ones for me happened in Las Vegas, of all places. And
Lost wages, lost wages, Nevada.
and I think that's, it's an interesting story because it really changed and altered the whole course of my life in a large way. And what happened was I had been a student of music at Berklee College, and like most young kids, I had great aspirations, wanted to be a star, travel the world, do all this kind of stuff. I'd been a sax player. I went as a jazz performance major on saxophone, and I had done really well in my teenage years. I was kind of like a pseudo celebrity in my little neck of the woods. I played with a lot of older bands and so forth. I mean, I was playing in clubs when I was 15 years old. So I was ready for it, And so as a lot of young musicians at Berklee will do is they'll only go for a short time, and then they will basically audition into some band or whatever and then start traveling and touring. And that's what I did. I was a few years into my, just about a few years into my degree program, and then I did an audition and ended up in this band that was going to travel the world, do the international casino circuit. And in any case, I found that life on the road presented a lot of different challenges that I didn't quite expect. And for example, I ended up in Las Vegas and was only supposed to do a 6 week stint there, and it started to turn into many months. And because we kept signing these additional contracts, We were doing very well. The band that I was with became celebrities in the town. There's kind of like the mainline big players that put the headlines on all the marquees, the Celine Dion's and uh, all those people. And then there's like the next level down, and we were kind of at the top of that level. So a lot of celebrities were coming to see us and going to those kinds of parties and all that. And then there was this big kind of political chaos that erupted in the band. A lot of old players that had been alumni of this particular band worked in Vegas and wanted to be back in the band because it was so successful and getting a lot of notoriety. So some of us who were all young guys that have auditioned out of Berkeley were now like, in a way, fighting for our lives, for our jobs, because these other guys were trying to undercut us and get in. And this happened pretty badly to one of my friends who was the drummer. And I had to kind of defend him. And then they came after me. And it was a really cutthroat kind of business. It was crazy. I saw a whole kind of dark underside of the music world. And I remember one day walking down the strip in Las Vegas, and a scripture verse popped into my head because I had had faith growing up as a kid, and I was, your average teenager who, had kind of fallen away from church. I was always obliged to go to church growing up, but when I became of age, so to speak, my mom gave me the choice. I had done confirmation and all that, and as a lot of kids do, they kind of fall out of practice. They have their own agenda and plans, and I was just like that. And so, needless to say, I had fallen away, but my mom had dragged me and my sister to prayer groups and different things along the way. So we had a lot of grace and a lot of the Word of God and elements kind of put to us. So I was walking down the strip in Las Vegas, and a scripture verse just popped right in my head. It was, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" And I sat there like stunned. I was like, did I come here to gain the world and lose my soul? It was like all of a sudden I was getting convicted that here I was like rising up in the world of entertainment and so forth, and I was 20 years old basically, and I'm trying to evaluate, what's going on here? What am I doing here? Why is it that there's not even like a church I can pop into to collect my thoughts to pray? It was like I'm in this world of glitter and neon. And I went back to my hotel room. I stared at the ceiling, and then I prayed for the first time in a long time. I was like, God, did I really come here to gain the world and lose my soul? Like, I know I have to pay my dues to make it in this industry, but not at that cost. Not at that cost. Like, show me the way. I don't know what to do. I'm only a kid. Like, how do I make these big decisions? I need you to show me the way. And I asked for a sign. I gave him a very specific package. I told God what he had to do. And needless to say, he delivered that night, like off the charts. The next day, I gave my notice to the band, and I told them that I would finish out a certain leg of the tour and whatnot, but I wasn't flying overseas and doing this other stuff and I wasn't going to even continue in Vegas. We just had one other city I was going to do. So, needless to say, after that, I went back and I decided I was going to finish my degree and do something that could enable me to stay in one city. And
That's just gotta stop you because it's a phenomenal story at this point. I gotta stop you, but a couple of questions. Beside the fact that you had grown up in the faith and your mom had made you go to church and the family went to church, you were regular participants in the sacramental life of the church. What do you attribute that voice coming to you and giving that verse? Where did that come from? It's not like you were
I'll
looking
tell you
for
what it was. It was my mom and all her friends praying the rosary for me day after day. They were so on fire. My mom had a lot of faith. She had a lot of um, holy women friends, and they were praying for me all the time. And I'm sure the grace of God was not uh, deaf to their pleas to look out for Bobby. It was God take care of my Bobby. And
This is a St. Augustine Monica moment.
it absolutely was, because, this wasn't like the first challenge to my path in life. There, like I said, there was many different conversion points, but this was one major seismic kind of shift, because I had had this vision of what my life would be. And it was the first time I really turned that compass over to God and said, wait, I don't want to do it just my way. I don't want to just do it the world's way. You've got to show me how to do this, because my way could collapse. I saw what was going on. I saw what was happening in this culture of celebrity and debauchery. Really, there was so much there. I mean, I literally, the day I got off the plane, I had to have been propositioned like 3 times before. No, I just couldn't even believe it. I was like, what planet did I land on here? This is crazy. And
But
so
this is more and more like St. Augustine by the moment. I mean, everything about the life of debauchery, the life of self-will run riot.
you
And
could you
it's
could
that
throw yourself into it so easily. And some of the other members of this band did quite that. And they just reveled in the kind of privileges that were extended to them as being part of this, elite celebrity club. And literally it had to have been the grace that was afforded to me by all the people who loved me and prayed for me. I'm certain that was like monumental.
there's a certain thing that I think it was really bears note here. And so many of my podcasts so far have been talking about the way that the individual has responded directly to God's grace. But there hasn't been a lot of talk about this whole idea of a community of faith working together, and the family of God working together to save everybody in the family. I mean, I was speaking to a guy last night who's getting ready to have his daughter baptized. We're talking about the idea that the entire community of faith is one, praying for all the members, that all of them be saved as God wills that every one of his children be saved and not lost. And that the church in heaven, the church in purgatory, the church on earth all prays together for common purposes. And when we apply ourselves to that, it's overpoweringly transformative. Overpoweringly transformative. I mean, that has to be, I mean, there's so many ways that we could say, oh, I was just thinking about, I was meditating about something else and God spoke to me. Maybe it was the idea that all these people praying for me had opened my ears to the offer of grace that was already there. It was there all along. I'm just exploring ideas here, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. It's kind of an amazing thing to talk about this whole community of believers, the church as one, extended through space and time, all working together for the benefit of one person. That one person is going to affect tons of other lives.
Absolutely. And there were other, and here's how this tale kind of unfolds. And if you take the long view, because I altered my course, so to speak, and went back to school, decided I would do something to shift direction so I could stay in one place rather than live on the road and be subjected to that lifestyle. I started a studio in Boston. I was doing all this kind of stuff. You can see I'm in the studio now at my home studio. But, I did commercial music work and that kind of thing for a number of years. But I went through another conversion experience. It was like the Blessed Mother was reaching out to me. And this was a profound shift. And somebody had sent me this book and said, oh, you got to read this. One day, this voice just said, go get that book on the shelf. I pulled it out. It was about the Marian movement of priests and whatnot. And so I started praying the rosary and reading this book. And I was taken back, and something happened and shifted in me. And then out of the blue, this priest who was at the prayer group that my mom used to drag me to and that I really loved, because he was a holy priest and he was so Christ-like, and he just was sweating the love of God. I mean, he was amazing. I'd gone to the Holy Land with him and I had an off the charts experience. But in any case, he called me out of the blue and said, I'm starting this prayer meeting and I need someone to lead the music for it. And you came to mind. And it was like, I'm on the phone there and God's on the other end asking me to step up and now use my gifts for him. And how could I say no? It was like It wasn't Father Ray asking me, it was the Lord. And I said, yes, I'll do this. And so that's how I got into music ministry. I was like, I've never, saxophone's my thing. Keyboard's just like a secondary instrument. I use it for writing and all that. It's not even my main instrument. I'd have to lead this group on keyboard. And he's like, that's okay. I was like, okay, I guess God makes a way. He doesn't call the what's the expression? The gifted or whatever. He gifts those he calls or whatever. It's that idea that you often don't feel worthy. Moses didn't feel worthy. I can't talk. That's okay. I got that worked out. Just say yes. And so that was the thing that was the hinge point that got me into music ministry. So I went and did this prayer group for several years before he moved down to EWTN, and then I had made another priest friend, which we did a lot of recording together, made a number of records. I was doing a lot of gospel and records as an independent producer. And then I started serving as a sub in different parishes, just playing masses and so forth. And that's how I met you eventually with Bernie playing at a Life Teen in Dedham. And then I was looking for a possible gig playing in a church on a regular basis. And needless to say, all the things came full circle. And I had this opportunity at Holy Family in Rockland, which where we served together for so long. And then when I stepped out of my car and was going to the job interview there was a man on the porch who yelled down to me, "Are you Bob Kirby?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "We have a mutual friend." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Father Ray Bork." And soon as those words fell from his lips, I said, "I'm home." Like this 25-year arc, it was like I was meant to be here because the priest that invited me into music ministry was Father Ray Bork. And when he said those words, God was speaking to me again, saying, "I brought you here, and this is where you're going to be." I've been there for 25 years. And, all the other parts of my music life have orbited around that, and here comes my granddaughter. Yes, it's amazing. And it's all because at these different hinge points, at these different moments where God provided that grace, I had enough grace to say yes. And those are two of the most.
Hear the invitation first, to hear the invitation and then to say yes. Because so many people they're waiting for that big moment. It's like the burning bush moment or the bolt of lightning moment. But I think of Elijah at the mouth of the cave, when he hears that still small voice, and he happened to be listening for it, right? Where he would not have heard God's voice in the whispering sound. And so often that's the way God presents himself to us, in a whispering sound. He doesn't come out and overpower us. He doesn't slam us up against the wall and say, "You're going to come with me." He gently invites us, and he whispers to us. And if we're listening, we hear it.
Oh, hold on one second. I've got to attend to my little baby here for a second.
Absolutely. We'll put this on hold.
All right, honey, I'm on this.
Bob is taking care of the dangerous situation with his granddaughter being afraid of the scary movie. So the home front's all squared away, and we can resume talking about this great spiritual discussion of ours, which culminates in exactly what you just did. You're working with this young girl who's the product of the relationship you had with God, and what your ability to understand what he's calling you to was continually modified. Your understanding of even what married life is about changed and grew and has blossomed. And at some point, I hope to have your beautiful wife Heather on here, who I also love dearly, and have her on the podcast as well. She's studying for her doctorate, and
Yeah, She's amazing in the amount of things that she takes on, and she slays them all. She does an incredible job.
She really does. And I've got to say that I was grateful to be part of that story. I mean, kind of hidden amongst that whole story about you and Ray Bork and that man up on the parish steps, calling out to you about Ray Bork. Yeah, I had come to that parish just a month or so before you got there, and I recommended that you come, and something inside me was saying, Bob Kirby's the guy for this job. I don't know why that was, but part of it was that I knew that you worked with the Life Teen group, and I was starting a Life Teen ministry at the parish, and I thought you were perfect. And something inside me was saying, trust the Spirit, trust the Holy Spirit. You got a good feeling about this, go with it. And that was 25 years ago. Heavens.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Time
It's
flies.
like it flew by.
Well, I'm just so grateful to have got to know you a little bit, and I'm looking forward to the next installment of this, where we're going to talk about some of the other changes that have happened over the ways that you followed that call to do His will rather than your own will. And that was, for me, that was a huge deal when I started to understand that my will was fine insofar as it conformed to God's. The use of my will isn't a bad thing, but not using it in conformity with God's will is just, it's a waste of my time. It's a waste of everybody's time and effort if I tried to do it my way, because ultimately God will have His way. And it's always better for me.
One of the things that Bob brought up, and I've been talking about internally, talking to myself and talking to other people about, one of the things that I really want to point out is this idea that God is constantly giving us a direction for our lives, but He's also given us free will. And sometimes our free will does not align itself very well with what He wants for us to do, which is the best for us. He knows our inner, He knew us from before we were born. Jeremiah tells us that before we were born, he knit us together in our mother's womb. He knew every bit of our being before we were even born, and He has a plan for us. And we tend to think that we're the ones who are going to make the plans. And as we get older, we start realizing that God has made the plans all along. And it's whether I've cooperated with or not in those plans, is whether I'm happy or not. I have found in later life that I'm much happier with all the things that are going on in my life that are untoward. I'm much happier because my will has learned to be accessible to God's will. Instead of trying to find my own will on things and ask Him to go along with it, I'm asking Him what His will is for me and going along with that. And when we do that, we get all kinds of amazing things happening. My life is full and more full than I could have imagined at this point, 10 years ago even. But we'll have Bob back again, and we're going to actually have his wife, Heather, who's also a wonderful lady, on. She's currently working on a doctorate in music, so it's going to make it tough for her to be with us, but she'll be here. I've got a couple of surprise guests that have expressed interest in being with us, so stay tuned. In the next few weeks, we're probably going to have some interesting guests from places of, well, worldly power, worldly fame that you will meet and see how their experiences are much like yours. So keep looking for the way that God is calling you, see what He's asking you to do, and be willing to take on whatever He wants, because if we do that, we will enjoy it much more. This is for Jim Clark for the Dismas Diaries. Please remember to like and subscribe so that we can always be updated, and I will see you next time we drop one. Have a good week, everybody.